I pushed the SOS button on my Garmin InReach Mini in an actual emergency. And one of the most popular questions I get asked about my experience is, what happens? We are going to get into step-by-step what it was like, including who responds to you, what kind of questions they ask, and what you should do if you're ever in an emergency situation. I'm Meg Atterbury, and I'm an ex-professional writer for the outdoors, and I had to hit the SOS button for my best friend. We were high on a rocky pass, off trail, on a route in the Wind River Range. And I want to share what that experience was like so that you can be better prepared out there. SOS is really simple. All you have to do is use your finger to pull up and back on the SOS button to reveal the actual button inside. This is so you don't accidentally set off your device. And all you need to do is push and hold it. It takes about 4 seconds and the device starts beeping right away, very loudly and incessantly. A little triangle pops up on the screen and does a countdown from 20. An automated message is sent after those 20 seconds and it marks your location, device type, and how the device was activated. From here, Garmin turns on a few features that you cannot turn off until you cancel the SOS. And this is important because this drains the device battery really quickly. Tracking gets turned on, and then the power button no longer works, meaning you cannot turn off your device unless you cancel your SOS. According to Garmin, they send an updated location point every minute for the first 10 minutes, and then they will send an updated location to Garmin every 10 minutes. Once that 20-second countdown is done, you have the option to send a variety of preset messages. The first one is the most basic. It reads, "I have an emergency and you need to send help." There are a few other options to choose from. These were mostly pertaining to transportation, such as I was in a car accident and things of that nature. If you just hit the OK button on your device, it automatically sends the generic emergency message I mentioned, or you can pick one that's better suited to your situation. Now, if you're in a situation where you cannot respond and you don't reply, they do still send help. We were above treeline on a rocky pass with a clear view of the sky when we hit the SOS button, and everything went through immediately. When those messages send, they open up something called the Garmin Emergency Response message. The address reads as Garmin Emergency Response. On your EarthMate app, that will be in bright red at the top, and it will always be the first line you see for any of your messages, both on the device or in the app. And overall, I found the messages that I sent through the Garmin Emergency Response went through quicker than any other messages I sent to anyone else during my entire rescue situation. Garmin Emergency Response is going to ask you general questions about your emergency. Meanwhile, they are calling your phone number or the phone number attached to the device's account and the phone numbers of your emergency contacts. It's essential that you give Garmin Dispatch a really brief, concise overview of what is going on. Try to eliminate any uncertain language and be very direct with what's happening. I let them know where we were, what had occurred, and what the suspected injuries were. They also asked for a name and age of the individual who was hurt. I let them know that we were attempting to self-rescue from where we were, and I gave them directions to our goal location by looking at a topo map. Garmin then began to coordinate behind the scenes with the local dispatch, and at that point, the local dispatch reached out to me that showed up like a regular message on my Garmin InReach. It is important to know that Garmin does charge you for all of the messages that you receive from local dispatch or a local search and rescue coordinator. They do not charge you for any messages you send to the Garmin Emergency Response team. This isn't to say that you shouldn't send messages directly to the people in charge of your rescue. You absolutely should. However, just note that there will be charges for that. The local address that they gave me had the county name and it said dispatch on it and it had a .gov email address. And they immediately asked if we could get to a spot where a helicopter could safely land. And if so, could we mark the location? And this was about 5 minutes after the initial button press. And I told them how I was going to mark a location for them. I also told them what bright colored items we had on us and who they were with. And I told them that I was going to go build a giant X in a field and mark it with the pack cover once we got to that location. Again, the messages were super short and to the point so that they could get relayed to the appropriate party quickly and clearly. They asked us how many people were in our party and if I wanted to get rescued too. That was a little strange to me. Of course, I wanted to be with my friend. I did say yes. It wasn't even a question in my mind if I should leave her behind or not. They asked a bit more in-depth info about her injury, including which side it was on, what we had done to triage it. I also noted that she had taken some over-the-counter ibuprofen and her pain level had increased. Once we got to smoother ground, I ran ahead and built my X out of the rocks, which is an aviation signal for medical help needed. I also put my hiking pole on the ground and put a bright yellow camp t-shirt on top of it to act as a windsock, and then took the bright orange rain pack cover and placed it in the middle of the X, stretching it out as big as I could with rocks. About 50 minutes later, after the initial call, they asked us not to move and give them final coordinates. I literally stood on the marker and gave them the coordinates from the marker. The Garmin Emergency Response would also send updates as well. It was clear that they were in direct contact with local dispatch and the search and rescue coordinator. So something would happen on the ground with search and rescue, and I typically get 2 to 3 messages about it. One from the Garmin Emergency Response team, one from the local dispatch, and one from the local search and rescue coordinator. Eventually, the local dispatch did drop off. However, since the call was still active, they said that we could tap in if anything about the conditions of my friend did change. We even got updates when the helicopter was halfway there. However, the helicopter couldn't land for the first time. In fact, it really even didn't get that close to the ground. It took them 20 hours to rescue us. When they did their first couple passes, they were able to see us, and Garmin, as well as the local SAR coordinator, let us know that our location had been confirmed and we were told not to move. There are a lot of factors that go into search and rescue. First of all, they might have a foot team and they might not be able to reach you that quickly. They also might be waiting on weather and circumstances that will allow them to get to you, especially if they're coming in by helicopter. And that weather and circumstance could be totally different where they are versus where you are, like you can see here.
They told us they will not be coming tonight due to weather.
Yes.
As you can see, the weather is just fine here.
It was real nice.
But where they are located, the winds are apparently horrendous and they can't launch.
Eventually, the search and rescue team told us that they were coming in the next morning, and they somewhat signed off for the night, although they were still around should something really wild happen, like my friend's vitals tanked or something like that. Garmin Emergency Response stepped in again, and they would check in with us every hour, just asking if we were okay and how we were doing. It is important to note that if you don't respond to a Garmin Emergency Response message, it keeps beeping at you as a reminder every few minutes. We felt very held and cared for throughout the entire experience. We never felt like we didn't know what was going on or what the plan was, and it always felt like somebody was watching us. We tried to sleep, and not that much sleep was had. I think we each got around 3 to 3.5 hours of really restless sleep. And during that time, I told Garmin Emergency Response that we were going to try to sleep and to contact us at a set time the next morning. So we were not bombarded by messages every hour throughout the night. But if you felt like it was going to be helpful to you, you could be. The next morning, the local SAR coordinator got in touch with us about 30 minutes before the next pickup attempt was supposed to happen. Again, we gave a very brief to-the-point response about the weather and how we were doing, and the helicopter landed this time because the winds were really calm, and it was a very quick and simple process. However, there is one important thing to know. You cannot bring bear spray in a helicopter. Logically, this makes a lot of sense. Bear spray goes off, everyone dies. So we took our bear spray out and they put it in a Pelican case for us during our flight. Here's where things also got interesting. This is going to be very situational dependent, but they did bring us to a small local airport where an ambulance then came and picked us up. Now, depending on what county you're in and how your search and rescue works for where you are, depends on its cost, and what type of helicopter ride you take also depends on the cost. If you are in a medical evacuation situation, meaning a helicopter is taking you from where you were picked up to the hospital, your health insurance gets involved at that point and the costs can skyrocket. However, where we were at Sublette County in Wyoming, search and rescue is free as long as they bring you to a base and then medical staff pick you up from that base. When we got picked up by the ambulance, my friend's insurance kicked in and the bill started to go up from there. I don't have any access to that information. However, the rescue cost me $0 with the exception of a few overage charges because I went over my Garmin messages and I think I paid something like $35 extra. Garmin did not charge me for the extra tracking. When they showed up, I kept the SOS on. Honestly, I did not know how to turn it off, even though it is literally written on the back of the device. However, I was so exhausted at that point. I had hardly slept. I had been manning my own rescue for 20 hours, and I was really focused on my friend and her health. It just took a while for me to be able to take a deep breath and collect myself and cancel the SOS. You simply cancel it the same way you start it, which is totally obvious now, but definitely wasn't obvious to me in the moment. So I am so incredibly grateful for the compassion and tenacity of Tip Top Search and Rescue in Sublette County. These people are primarily volunteers and they put their life on the line to get to us. It is always a great idea after an event to circle up with Search and Rescue, tell them the medical diagnosis of what happened, and then hit that donate button and give whatever it is you can to the search and rescue community that helped you out that day. If you want to look at what I learned about my Garmin InReach device throughout my SOS call, including a few tips I promise you are not thinking about, then tune into my next video where I dive into what you need to know about your Garmin InReach during an SOS.